Genshin Impact was crowned Game of the Year by both Google and Apple in 2020, and Best Mobile Game by Game Awards in 2021. With over 20 million players since its launch 2 years ago, it has continued to grow significantly to this day. Little did people know, in August this year, it was reported that threat actors had abused Genshin's vulnerable anti-cheat driver MiHoYo Prot2.sys to kill off antivirus processes with the intention of mass deploying their ransomware. This driver is said to be easily integrated into any malware without the need to even install Genshin in the first place. So without further ado, let's simulate this ransomware attack to gain a better understanding into the inner workings of the hack of Genshin Impact. This hypothetical company has an outward-facing web application with their internal network behind a firewall. Within their internal network are our targets. We plan to extract any sensitive information from the file server and deploy a ransomware attack on the hosts in the network. Each of these nodes will continuously stream logs to a logging server which uses the ELK stack. Now that we have a pretty good idea of how our target's infrastructure looks like, let's begin our attack.
Shouldn't let your guard down.
In the first phase, the initial access, the MITRE technique that we'll be using is exploit public-facing application. From the web server's HTTP response headers, we can obtain the type and version that it's using. This version in particular introduces a vulnerability which allows a remote attacker to execute a path traversal attack, potentially resulting in remote code execution. In our case, we modified the resources hosted here for users in the internal network, infecting them with a remote access Trojan, or RAT in short, in order to achieve lateral movement. The MITRE technique associated with this portion of the attack is taint shared content. Users will then unsuspectingly download and run the executable, giving us the ability to run a shell with normal privileges. We'll go into more detail on how our C2 server is integrated with Slack, a common messaging app used by businesses in the exfiltration phase.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Moving on to the second phase, we enumerate the victim's machine for any vulnerabilities that could help us with privilege escalation. We find that there is a scheduled task meant to back up the user's files. Fortunately for us, it seems to be misconfigured as backup.exe is executed as system with the highest privileges. A devastating mistake made by administrators, providing us with a way to possibly run any executable with those exact privileges by overwriting backup.exe. The MITRE technique associated with this portion of the attack is scheduled task. After overwriting backup.exe with our own RAT, once the scheduled task runs again, the shell spawned from the RAT will now have full system privileges. Finally, we can install our Genshin anti-cheat driver into the victim system and kill off any antivirus software that may be running. Going into more detail on this driver, the reason it is so dangerous is the fact that it is signed by Windows as a legitimate module, with the capability to operate at ring 0 and bypassing privileges from user mode to kernel mode. We are effectively repurposing trusted code to avoid detection of our post-exploit activities. The MITRE techniques associated with this form of defense evasion is disable or modify tools and code signing. Before we move on to the next phase of our attack, let's take a closer look at our C2 server integrated with Slack. The MITRE technique associated with our command and control server is web service bidirectional communication. Our RAT uses the Slack API when communicating with our server in order to disguise all our network activity as normal Slack traffic. It is almost impossible to discern between normal user activity from our C2 communications. Any files uploaded from or downloaded to the victim are all from the verified files.slack.com domain, hiding our footprint as no requests need to be made to external IP address or URLs. Furthermore, all data between the RAT and Slack is automatically encrypted using TLS 1.3, so C2 commands and malicious payloads cannot be detected in the network traffic.
This is order.
With that huge explanation of our C2 server out of the way, we transfer over Mimikatz, a tool which greatly simplifies the process of obtaining Windows credentials. We then run it to obtain the NTLM hash of the user's password, use an online hash cracker, and use this password to access any sensitive files from the file server. These are then exfiltrated to us using the C2 server. On to the final phase of the operation, where we put the impact into this Genshin Impact exploit, the MITRE technique used will be data encrypted for impact. In order to simulate a ransomware attack, we developed PowerShell scripts using the file cryptography module from Tyler Secrist. This module exports functions to encrypt and decrypt files using AES encryption. Using our RAT, we will execute this script to encrypt all files within the user's root folder recursively, with a key only known to us, rendering them unusable. We will also change the wallpaper of the victim's machine with a ransomware note, informing them to pay the ransom in exchange for the decryption of their files. So yeah, this could happen to your PC.